I grew up in a small coastal town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and secrets were usually hard to keep. But there was one place, one dark corner of my hometown that carried a secret none of us could quite explain. It was an old farm that sat strangely out of place along the coastline. Most farms belonged inland, surrounded by fields, but this one overlooked the gray waves of the sea. It was weather-beaten, half-forgotten, and whispered about whenever people passed it by. The farm wasn't just one building. There was the main house, 2 stories tall with broken windows that stared out like hollow eyes. Beside it stood a smaller cottage, crooked and sinking into the earth, as though tired of holding itself upright. A barn loomed nearby, tall and shadowed, its doors creaking in the sea wind. There were small stables, long empty of horses, and further back a brick building we assumed was some kind of workshop. The strangest part was that all of this sat right by the shore, the waves endlessly crashing behind it, like some forgotten frontier between land and sea. We were teenagers then, around 15 or 16, and like many kids our age, we were drawn to places we weren't supposed to be. The old farm became our hideout, our stage for dares, our place to test bravery. It had been abandoned for years, its walls scarred with graffiti, its floors littered with broken glass, but it carried an energy, like every room remembered the people who had lived and died there. I had heard bits and pieces of its history. Supposedly, there used to be an inn nearby in the 1800s, a place where sailors and travelers would stop. Rumor had it that a murder had happened there, or maybe more than one. Some said the farm itself had seen death too. After all, buildings that old always carry their share of tragedy. I never found solid proof, but the rumors were enough to feed our imaginations. One gray afternoon, I went there with 2 of my closest friends. The sky was overcast, the kind of weather where the sea looks steel blue and endless. The wind cut through our jackets as we made our way down the familiar path, crunching over broken shells and driftwood, until the farm came into view. Even though we had been there countless times before, the first sight of those dark, leaning buildings always sent a small shiver down my spine. We decided to start in the barn. It was the largest structure besides the house, its wooden beams sagging with age. The doors were half open, and when we stepped inside, the world outside seemed to fall away. The barn smelled of damp wood and rust, and dust floated in the air like faint smoke. Our footsteps echoed across the empty space, mingling with the sound of the ocean beyond. Now, it's important to understand, the coastline wasn't deserted. People often walked the paths nearby, families with dogs, couples out for a stroll. Sometimes you could hear voices drifting over the wind, but never, not once in all the times we had explored, had we heard a voice from inside the barn that was loud and clear. That day, as we were poking around the far end, I suddenly heard something. At first it was just a noise, but my brain registered it instantly as a girl's voice. I couldn't tell you what was said. It was more like an instinct, a certainty that what I heard was a young girl speaking. My stomach dropped and I whipped my head toward the far corner. At the exact same moment, my friend who was listening to music through his headphones pulled one earbud out and snapped his head in the same direction. Our eyes met, wide with confusion. "You heard that too?" he asked, his voice low. "Yeah," I said, my skin prickling. "It sounded like a girl," he finished for me. But here's where it got strange. Our third friend, who was standing right beside us, stared at us in total confusion. "What are you guys talking about?" he asked. "You didn't hear that?" I pressed. "Hear what?" We explained that we both heard a girl's voice from the corner of the barn, but he shook his head. He swore up and down that he hadn't heard a single thing. For a moment, the 3 of us just stood there in silence, the barn creaking around us, dust motes drifting through the dim light. I tried to convince myself it could have been someone outside, maybe a girl passing by on the coastal path. But the way it sounded, the way it felt, made that explanation hard to swallow. It wasn't just noise carried on the wind. It was sharp, clear, directed, like it was meant to be heard. And the strangest part of all was that only 2 of us had heard it, while the third, standing just as close, had no idea. That moment stayed with me. It was unsettling not just because of what we heard, but because of what it suggested, that whatever it was, it didn't want everyone to notice. After the incident in the barn, the 3 of us walked back outside into the cold air, unsettled but pretending not to be shaken. That was what we did back then. We covered fear with jokes and nervous laughter, but none of us mentioned the girl's voice for the rest of the day. It was almost as if speaking about it too much might make it come back. Weeks passed, and our trips to the farm became routine again. The barn incident faded into the background, like a strange dream we weren't sure we had actually shared. But then came the day that changed everything. The day I will never forget. It started like any other. The sky was heavy with clouds, the sea restless and loud as it crashed against the rocks. We had skipped down the familiar trail, 3 teenagers chasing a thrill. The farm stood waiting, still and crooked, the sea wind tugging at its broken shingles. I remember thinking that the place looked darker than usual, like the shadows were thicker, stretched long across the ground, even though the sun was hidden. This time we decided to go inside the main house. Getting in wasn't easy. The doors had long since been bolted or rotted shut, so the only way inside was a half-broken ladder that leaned up against a second-floor window. Looking back, it was reckless, stupid even, but at 15 you think you're invincible. We climbed one by one, the ladder groaning under our weight, until we hauled ourselves into the upstairs room. The air inside the house was different. It smelled older, heavier, like layers of dust had soaked into the wallpaper. The floors creaked under our steps, and the walls seemed to close in, warped and cracked from decades of neglect. We had explored this place before, but that day it felt different, charged. We wandered from room to room, kicking aside trash, shining flashlights into corners, daring each other to open closet doors. Eventually, we found ourselves at the doorway that led to the staircase down to the first floor. Normally, this would be the next obvious step. Descend into the darkness below, see what secrets waited in the shadows. But none of us moved. We just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, staring down the staircase. I don't know why, but I don't like this, my friend muttered. He wasn't the only one. My chest felt tight, like the air itself had turned heavy. A low hum of dread ran through me, not tied to anything I could see or hear, but undeniable. I opened my mouth to say something casual to break the silence, but the words wouldn't come out. "Something's wrong," I finally whispered. All 3 of us felt it. The playful mood we had carried with us into the house was gone, replaced by a silent, suffocating fear. It wasn't like the barn, where a single noise had startled us. This was different. This was a presence, thick and oppressive, pressing against us like invisible hands on our shoulders. "I think we should leave," and for once, no one argued. We turned and climbed back out the way we came, scrambling down the ladder and breathing in the sharp, salt air like it was the first breath after being underwater. The relief was instant but fragile. None of us laughed this time. We didn't even talk about it. We just walked down to the beach, letting the sound of the waves swallow up the tension. And here's the part that chills me to this day. Hours after we left, one of the farm buildings caught fire. Not the main house, the one where we had felt that overwhelming dread, but another building on the property. We heard about it the next day, when smoke-stained ruins were all that remained of the structure. The logical part of me wanted to dismiss the connection. Buildings that old were bound to collapse, rot, or catch fire eventually. Maybe it was vandals, maybe it was lightning, maybe it was nothing more than coincidence. But the timing, the way we had stood frozen at the top of that staircase, convinced something was terribly wrong, only to find out later that disaster had struck the farm the very same night, was too much to ignore. And I keep asking myself, what exactly did we feel in that house? It wasn't just fear. Fear is sharp, electric, but this was heavy, suffocating, almost like a warning. Like something or someone was urging us not to go further, not to step into whatever waited below. And when the fire came, I couldn't help but wonder if that presence had been protecting us. Why did only 2 of us hear the girl's voice in the barn? Why did all of us feel the same crushing dread in the house? Was it coincidence? Was it imagination? Or was it something else entirely? Something that lingers in places where death and tragedy have left a mark. The farm has long since been demolished. Where it once stood is now just a scarred patch of land by the sea, the ruins cleared away, the history buried under time. But for me, the memory is still vivid. The echo of a girl's voice in an empty barn. The invisible weight that stopped us from descending the stairs. The fire that followed like punctuation to a story we never finished. And I can't help but wonder, was the farm haunted by tragedy? Or was it something stranger? Something that wanted us gone, not out of malice, but out of protection. I'll never know, but I carry that question with me every time I walk past the coastline where the old farm used to stand.
Years have passed since those days, but the memories of that farm still linger in the back of my mind like a story I can't quite close. Sometimes I wonder if it's because we were teenagers, impressionable and eager for mystery, that we gave the place more weight than it deserved. Maybe it was just a decaying property, falling apart under the weight of time and weather. But if that's all it was, why do I still feel the chill when I think about the girl's voice? Why does my stomach twist when I remember the silence at the top of those stairs? I've spoken to my friends about it since then. We don't live in the same town anymore, but every once in a while when we catch up, the farm comes up in conversation. And every time, the details match. One of them always says, "Do you remember that voice in the barn?" The other nods, "And the stairs in the main house? I swear something was waiting down there." We all laugh nervously, but none of us really believes it was nothing. Deep down, I think we all know better. There's something strange about the way memories cling. Some fade quickly, lost in the noise of everyday life, but others dig deep, refusing to let go, as if they have unfinished business. The farm is like that for me. I've walked past the site since it was torn down, seen the empty land where the buildings once stood. The sea still crashes there, the wind still howls, but the place feels hollow now, stripped to whatever life or death it once carried. And yet, even with nothing left, I can't shake the feeling that it watches still, waiting. Sometimes late at night I replay the questions in my head. Why did 2 of us hear the girl's voice but not the third? Was it something only meant for certain years? Was it a trick of the mind? Or did something reach across to make itself known? And that day in the house, what exactly held us at the top of those stairs? Fear, yes, but not ordinary fear. It felt deliberate, intentional. as if the air itself had teeth and was warning us away. And then the fire. I can't explain that away no matter how many times I try. The building that burned wasn't even the one we had been in, but it happened the very same day, just hours later. Coincidence? Maybe. But my heart never believed it was that simple. Sometimes I wonder, what if we had gone downstairs? What if we had ignored that instinct and pushed forward into the darkness? Would the fire have been worse? Would it have trapped us? Or did something stop us precisely because we weren't meant to be there? I've read stories online since then, people sharing their own strange experiences in abandoned places, echoes of voices, shifts in energy, feelings of dread that come from nowhere. Many describe it the same way I felt it, not just fear, but a warning. And I wonder if that's what the farm gave us that day. Not an attempt to harm, but an urgent push to leave before it was too late. The farm is gone now, erased from the map of my hometown. Most people don't even remember it was ever there. But for me, it's permanent, stitched into the fabric of who I am. It was the place where I first realized that the world is heavier, stranger, and more mysterious than we admit. The place where I learned that sometimes the unseen can touch us more deeply than anything we can see with our eyes. I'll never have the answers. Maybe no one will. But when I walk along the coastline and feel the sea spray on my face, I think of the barn, the voice, the house, the stairs, the fire, and I feel grateful, oddly enough. Grateful that we listened to our instincts. Grateful that we left when we did. Because maybe, just maybe, something was trying to save us.
Thanks for watching. Don't miss the next story.